Before the tattoos, before the controversies, before the world knew the name Iron Mike, Mike Tyson was a frightened kid growing up in one of the toughest parts of Brooklyn. Years later, grown men would look across a boxing ring at him and appear, terrified before the first punch was even thrown. He became heavyweight champion of the world at only 20 years old. He had money, fame, power, and a reputation that made opponents fear him. But Mike Tyson's greatest opponent would not always be standing across the ring. Sometimes it was Mike Tyson himself. This is the story of how a troubled child became one of the most feared athletes in sports history, and how everything almost disappeared. Mike Tyson was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1966. His childhood was difficult. He grew up around poverty, crime, and violence. Tyson has spoken openly about being bullied as a child. He was overweight. He was shy, and he often felt afraid. But the frightened boy eventually began fighting back. And once he discovered fighting, something changed. Tyson was repeatedly getting into trouble as a teenager, and eventually ended up at a reform school. That is where his life took a completely different direction. A counselor and former boxer named Bobby Stewart noticed something unusual in the young Tyson. Power, speed, aggression, potential. Stewart eventually introduced him to legendary boxing trainer Cus D'Amato. And that meeting changed Mike Tyson forever. Cus wasn't just teaching Tyson how to throw punches. He was teaching him how to think, how to control fear, how to use fear, and perhaps most importantly, how to believe that he could become somebody. Cus saw a future heavyweight champion. Tyson began training obsessively. His style was explosive. He moved his head rapidly. He slipped punches. He attacked the body. Then came the hooks. And when Mike Tyson landed cleanly, fights could end very quickly. But before Tyson could fulfill the dream they shared, tragedy struck. Cus D'Amato died in 1985. He never got to see Tyson become heavyweight champion. Mike was still only a teenager, but the mission continued. Tyson turned professional in 1985, and then the knockouts started coming, one opponent after another. Some fights barely lasted long enough for fans to settle into their seats. Tyson wasn't built like the traditional towering heavyweight, but he was fast, extremely powerful, and frighteningly aggressive. He walked toward opponents with almost no expression on his face. No dancing, no smiling, no unnecessary show. Then came November 22, 1986. Mike Tyson faced Trevor Berbick for the WBC Heavyweight Championship. Tyson was only 20 years old. Berbick was an experienced champion, but experience didn't save him. In the second round, Tyson landed a devastating combination. Berbick went down. He tried to get up. He fell again. He tried once more. His legs simply wouldn't cooperate. The fight was over. At 20 years old, Mike Tyson had become the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history. The frightened kid from Brooklyn was now the heavyweight champion of the world. And boxing had a new monster. Tyson kept winning. He collected more championship belts. He became the undisputed heavyweight champion. His nickname fit perfectly, Iron Mike. By the late 1980s, Tyson wasn't simply beating opponents. He was creating fear. Some fighters appeared defeated before the opening bell. The black trunks, the black shoes, the stare, the walk toward the ring, and then the violence of the first round. Tyson's fights became events. People watched because they didn't know if the fight would last 12 rounds or 60 seconds. Then came a fight almost nobody expected him to lose. February 11, 1990, Tokyo, Japan. Mike Tyson faced Buster Douglas. Tyson entered the ring as a massive favorite. Douglas was supposed to be another opponent, another victory, another name on the record. Instead, boxing witnessed one of the greatest upsets in sports history. Douglas fought brilliantly. Then, in the 10th round, Mike Tyson went down. The referee counted. Tyson searched desperately for his mouthpiece, but he could not beat the count. The most feared fighter in the world had been knocked out. For the first time, the world saw Mike Tyson as vulnerable. And after that night, his life became increasingly chaotic. The problems outside the ring became bigger than boxing. In 1992, Tyson was convicted of raping Desiree Washington and was sent to prison. He ultimately served 3 years. The heavyweight champion who once seemed unstoppable was now behind bars. When Tyson was released in 1995, the question was obvious. Could Iron Mike become Iron Mike again? Millions wanted to find out. Tyson returned to boxing, and once again, the spectacle followed him. He regained heavyweight titles. For a moment, it appeared that the old Tyson might be returning. Then came Evander Holyfield. Their first fight ended with Holyfield defeating Tyson. The rematch became one of the most infamous nights in sports history. During the fight, Tyson bit Holyfield's ear. The bout descended into chaos. Tyson was disqualified, and an image that had once represented controlled destruction now seemed to represent something different, a man losing control. The years that followed brought more fights, more controversy and financial problems. Tyson had earned enormous amounts of money during his career, but eventually he filed for bankruptcy. The man who once had almost everything appeared to be losing everything. And yet Mike Tyson's story didn't end there. That may be the most surprising chapter. As Tyson grew older, the public began seeing a different version of him. He talked more openly about his childhood, his mistakes, his fear, his ego, his addictions, and his regrets. He appeared in movies. He performed a one-man stage show. He launched a podcast. And younger generations who never saw Tyson during his frightening prime discovered him as something completely different. Funny, reflective, sometimes emotional, still unpredictable, but no longer simply the terrifying heavyweight walking toward another knockout. In 2011, Mike Tyson was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. During his induction speech, he became emotional, talking about Cus D'Amato and the people who had helped shape his career. It was a remarkable image. The man once known as the baddest man on the planet was looking backward at the frightened young boy who had walked into a boxing gym decades earlier. And perhaps that's what makes Mike Tyson's story so fascinating. It's not simply a boxing story. It's a story about fear. Tyson has spent much of his life talking about fear. As a child, he experienced it. As a boxer, he learned to weaponize it. Then he created it in other people. But outside the ring, fear, anger, and instability followed him too. At his peak, Mike Tyson looked almost invincible. But he wasn't. He was human. He made serious mistakes. He experienced enormous consequences. He lost championships. He lost money. He lost years of his career. And somehow, he remained one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet. Decades after his prime, people still watch the old knockouts. They still talk about his speed, his power, his stare, and they still ask the same question. What would have happened if Mike Tyson had remained focused throughout his entire career? Maybe there will never be an answer. But one thing is certain. For a period in the late 1980s, heavyweight boxing belonged to Mike Tyson. He wasn't the biggest heavyweight. He wasn't the tallest. But when the bell rang, few men in sports history created more fear. The kid who once lived with fear became the man everyone feared. And that is why the legend of Iron Mike Tyson still refuses to disappear. Follow Sophia for more untold stories of the world's greatest sports legends.